Hello and welcome to the video. This video is all about how to build a pusher folding prop. Now these are the kind of things that you've seen in my videos at the back of stuff like Campaigner 2s, where the prop is designed to fold so that when it's rotating, the propeller blades pop into position, and then when you're landing, the air flowing over the blades pushes them back and they're safely tucked out the way so nothing gets snagged. Now folding props aren't new, and I've got them on lots of other models. So for example, this is the one at the front of my model, the Ezio 1500 glider, and it works great. The spinner at the front, along with the centrifugal force as the prop is spinning, pops the blades out, and then as soon as you stop the motor, the force of the wind pushes the blades against the nose, reducing the amount of drag. But when I decided that I was going to put a pusher folding prop onto my Dart XL, because the prop that comes with it is a great whacking bit of plastic, and I was worried about this getting snagged in the ground and snapping or damaging the motor mount at the back of that model, that's when the fun started. So what I've done is, hopefully in this video, tried to collate all the information and all the things I've learnt over the past 6 weeks, buying lots and lots of different types of props and building them and trying to figure out how to make them work properly. Because in a prop, of course, in a folding prop, you only want it to open a certain amount. You don't want it to open too far and actually smash into the back of the model itself. And when it folds down, you don't want the tips smashing into each other either. You just want them out of the airflow and out of the way of the ground. So in this video, what I'm going to go through are the different separate parts and the things you have to be aware of when you're ordering the bits, as well as I'll end up with my recommendation of what the perfect little folding prop needs to be, so you don't have to go and buy expensive props. I am a bit disappointed that in the hobby, the modern hobby that we have these days, you can't just say, okay, I want to replace this size prop with a folding pusher prop, go onto a website and buy all the bits. And hopefully this video will give somebody a kick in the pants to go and make that easier, because buying all the separate little bits and putting them together in the vain hope that they will actually end up making the prop that you want, bearing in mind that even parts that say they are all the same size are slightly different, can be a pain in the butt. But what I'll do at the end, I'll actually talk about, after getting all these different parts in, propellers from different manufacturers, different hubs, I'll actually talk about the ones that I prefer. So let me go onto the bench and talk you through what I've figured out. So here are a few folding props that I've got in and built over the last couple of weeks. But before we get into those, let's just have a look at the thing I'm trying to replace. So this again is the prop that's off the back of my Dart XL. And I don't know if you can see there, it's 9 by 4.5. So that is actually what I wanted to replace. If I grab a ruler, you can see that it actually is about 9 inches in length. So that's what I wanted in a folding prop configuration. Now the center shaft, it's about 5mm for the motor, so that's what I wanted. Now looking online, I tried to find a 9 by 4.5 folding prop, but really struggled. So ended up, the closest I could get was a 9 by 5 prop. Now these are ones from Gemfan. I also got 2 of those actually. I also got some Graupner ones we'll have a look at. These are 9 by 5, and I also got some Aeronaut ones which were 9 by 5 as well. So in theory, all 3 of these props that I've bought are made for 9 by 5. Now if I just line them up on the pin, which is where they are all connected, you can see that they're actually different lengths. You can see the one at the top, the Graupner, which is actually a lovely blade, is about 10mm longer than the others. So all of these props, so the one at the bottom, which is using the Gemfan props and a 38mm hub, is just under 9 inches long. If we look at the one above it, using the Aeronaut props and a bigger central hub, that's just over 9. And the one at the top with a 38mm hub and those big Graupner props is about 9.5 inches. So that's the first thing that I noticed. Even though all these blades purport to be the same size and pitch, they're actually slightly different lengths. But let's start by talking about the hub. Now there's a number of dimensions that you need to think about when you're buying the hub for your props. We'll come back to the props again in a moment. The first of all is how wide apart the two pins are that actually hold the prop in place. Now both of these are 38 millimeters wide. Let me kind of prove that to you. If I put this on kind of the midpoint of each of those pins, hopefully you can see that's 38 millimeters, and I'm going to put a diagram up here now. From the midpoint of those pins should be 38 millimeters. This is an Aeronaut hub, and again the middle point is 38 millimeters. So this appears to be one of the smallest versions that you can get, or you can obviously get wider versions. So with a 38 millimeter hub and 9x5" props, depending on the manufacturer of props, you're going to get about the right diameter, which is good news. The next thing you think about on your hub is actually the distance on the root of the blade. Now the blades actually seem to come in two different sizes, and this caught me out as well. This one is a 6 millimeter width, so you need to have 6 millimeter bases to the blade as well as a 6 millimeter holder, or you can have an 8 millimeter root to the hub, and that's something that you need to be careful of as well. So that's the second measurement. The blade root size needs to be the same size, and that is further compounded by the fact that if I take this pin out of here, this pin on the bigger sizes, so this is the 8 millimeter size here for the root of the blade, this pin is 3.2 millimeters, and you can see here that there's quite a decent size hole. Hopefully the camera will pick that up. So you just pop that into where you want it to be, slide your pin through, and then connect it with the bolts. So if you are using a smaller blade root, a 6 millimeter blade root, that pin size drops down to a 2 millimeter pin. So it's tricky if you want to put smaller blades onto a bigger hub, because it's not just a case of adding a little 1 millimeter shim each side. The actual hole at the bottom of the blade is not big enough for the 3.2 millimeter pins. So that's the second thing you need to be aware of when you're buying both the blades and the hub. The last thing is the bore for the motor. Now most of these, I mean these Myatech ones, I'll put links down below for all the stuff we're talking about here. These are from Banggood along with the Gem fan. I'll put the links to the other things as well. These are completely different sizes as well. So really what you need to do is have some form of collet to reduce this diameter inside the hub down to the size of the shaft of your motor. And the way I've done that is I've been, surprise, printing 3D parts. Let me just get this out. That actually do that, that fit in the back and take the diameter of the shaft down from this great big whacking hole that's in here. I think this is a 8 millimeter one, down to 5 millimeters. So just by snapping this in place, it changes it. And when you're doing all this folding prop stuff, it's really handy to have a 3D printer. Now I actually designed this part. You can see it on Thingiverse. I'll share it as well. And whenever I share one of these things, I'll share the hub and props that I'm using for it. But the way this works is not only is it doing the reduction from the size of the bore in the middle of the yoke down to the motor, it's also doing one other thing. Now, if we have another look at the folding prop on the back of the Aeronaut 2 from Team Black Sheep, a lot of props do this. They have a piece in the front and a piece at the back that stops the blades overextending or closing too much. So if we just jump back to the desk, so without the little 3D printed input, these blades will come all the way back here and potentially cut into the back of the model. You want them to stop a little bit short of that so that they don't overextend too far backwards. And also when they fold up, you don't want the tips smashing together and damaging them. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can either design and 3D print some kind of insert. And the way I've done this is all I did was kind of lay the yoke and the blades down, measure very carefully what the distances were at the front and back for each of those two positions, and then kind of designed and 3D printed this piece. Now the cool thing is, let me just make sure I'm putting it in the right way. If you snap it in, then that 3D piece both stops the blades going too far down, but also stops them closing up as well, and that's one way to do it. However, if we look at one of these others here, again, this is using those gem fan props. Not a massive fan of these, to be honest. I quite like the Graupner or the Aeronaut ones are really good. But what I've done is I've created two 3D printable pieces. Again, just figured out where the blades need to be. They will naturally rest when they are turning in one position. Usually, if you kind of pull them out by the tips, you get a rough idea of how they're going to sit. You want to make sure that they can go a little bit further than that, but not too much. And obviously you want to make sure that when they're in down position, they're not going to touch the tips. And if you can measure those two distances that you need, both that distance there on the top of the yoke and that distance there as those two pieces drop down, you can make some 3D printed parts. Now I've made these, again, designed and 3D printed them. Everything I'm going to do on here is on Thingiverse. It's designed to, again, take the big hole in the middle down to the shaft size. So that goes on that side. It only can open that far, and it'll only close up that side as well. Now, if you don't have a 3D printer, it isn't a complete disaster. What you can just do is use any kind of pieces of plastic that you can cut to the right length. And it might need a little bit of trimming, and just drill a hole through the middle that's the size of the motor shaft, and just make sure that they're not going to twist around, which is kind of what you had to do for that Team Black Sheep one that we've just had a look at. Last tip I'll give you, to balance the props, I would always kind of lay them flat like that. I'd nip up the bolts so that they'd started to bind slightly. You don't want to do the bolts up so they're too tight. You want them to be able to flop down freely with a bit of a shake, but you also don't want them too loose so that they're going to wiggle about. I would just nip them up so they're a bit firm, put them so that the blade tips are at the same level, and then pop them on a blade balancer and balance them as normal. So when they're open and spinning, they're probably going to be in roughly that position anyway. It should be pretty well balanced. So out of all of this kit, what would I recommend that you use from all the stuff that I've bought over the last 6 weeks? For me, I'm a massive fan of these Aeronaut hubs. Again, this is a 38mm hub. That is what it is. That's the part number there. So this is a 38mm with an 6mm root, which is what that word is. And I'm not going to try and say that. And it's an 8mm motor bore. So that's 6mm, that's 8mm, and that's 38mm. So we needed 6mm root blades. So that's what these are. These are the Graupner folding props. These are the Graupner ones that I'm using here. Again, 9x5. There isn't a part number on here that I can see, unless that's it, 1336.23.12. That might be just specific to the person that I ordered these from. The hub is nice and small. I can do all of the control of the blades with one single 3D printed part. And again, this is on Thingiverse if you have a 3D printer, or you can just cut 2 pieces to length to stop it moving. And once that's in, it manages the blade beautifully. It isn't too deep, because the only other challenge you've got is if you keep these pieces nice and chunky so that they're going to survive, that's the wrong hub, then potentially you end up with quite a deep piece. You're going to have quite a long motor shaft potentially to fit that on. So hopefully that's interesting for those of you that want to go about this. A couple of things that I found out. First of all is there are several different dimensions that you need for the hub or the yoke that you're going to buy. The first is that distance from pin to pin. 38mm seems to be the smallest one, and seems to be the one that gets you closest to the actual size of the overall diameter of the prop you're trying to replicate. You're also going to need to know the size of the root of the blade. That's either going to be 6mm or 8mm. Make sure that the blade root and the hub have the same size, because also the pins are different between the two sizes. And finally, you're going to end up with a hole that's an awful lot bigger than the one on your motor, so you are going to need some kind of sleeve or adapter. And again, if you have a 3D printer, this is where this comes in really handy. But snapping that all together should be able to give you a nice workable folding prop. Thanks for watching the video and watching right to the very end. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you like the video and like what I'm doing here, then hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification icon too. If you really like what I'm doing, you can go the extra mile and become one of my Patreons for access to me directly for support, and also giveaways and regular updates too. If you're looking for particular content, then check out the playlist. I organise all of my videos into playlists, so if you're looking for a particular topic, you can find everything here. If it's called Introduction To, it's designed to start very simply and build on that simple introduction to teach you all about it. If it's called For Beginners, then that is really aimed at people who are brand new to that part of the hobby. You can also search on YouTube for anything that you're interested in using the search function at the top. So iNav Painless 360 will find all of my videos and even the playlists around iNav. So thanks again for watching and happy flying.